The attic smelled like dust and forgotten time. Miles Carter never thought he'd return to that house again, not after what happened on that last Christmas Eve. The air was heavy, as if the house itself remembered. The floorboards creaked beneath his boots, echoing like whispers from the past. He hadn't spoken to his family in 3 years. He hadn't been invited, not after the book. They said he betrayed them. They said he twisted their lives into fiction. They said he turned their pain into profit. So this year, like the two before, Miles wasn't welcome at the Christmas table. But what none of them knew was that his grandmother had left something behind. Something hidden away in the shadows of the attic, wrapped in a faded ribbon, waiting in silence. A box of old letters, letters that would change everything. One envelope, one name, and a secret that no one ever intended to be found. What began as a simple search turned into a descent into decades of silence, betrayal, and truth. He came to find closure. He found a loaded weapon made of words. Miles Carter wasn't the kind of person who raised his voice. He never had to. His strength came from observation, the quiet kind that makes people nervous when they realize they've been seen, not just looked at, truly seen. Growing up in the coastal town of Westvale, Miles was always the odd one. While the rest of the Carters were loud, physical, involved in the local church, football games, and community bake sales, Miles was the boy with ink-stained fingers and a notebook under his arm. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it was often through stories. From a young age, he was drawn to characters. People fascinated him, not the masks they wore in public, but the quiet things they did when they thought no one was watching. He would sit by the window at family gatherings, silently observing how his aunt nervously stirred her coffee 3 times before drinking, or how his father always adjusted his wedding ring when asked about work. He took notes, not to hurt anyone, not to expose, just to understand. His world was made of details, fragments, glances. He wrote everything down, and eventually those notes turned into fiction. By the time he was 29, Miles had published his debut novel. It was celebrated in literary circles for its intimacy, its emotional rawness, and its authenticity. But within the Carter family, it was seen as an act of betrayal. Because the book wasn't just fiction, it was them. His uncle's temper, his cousin's addiction, the suffocating expectations of his mother, the silent disappointments of his father, all woven into the pages of a fictional story. Names were changed, locations adjusted, but the dynamics, they were undeniable. No one said anything directly. They didn't need to. The silence was immediate, cold, and complete. Invitations stopped coming. Text messages went unanswered. Even his grandmother, the only one who defended him, became quieter in their final phone calls. That last Christmas, 3 years ago, was the breaking point. He arrived at the Carter house with a bottle of wine and a copy of his book, a naive attempt to offer peace. He was met with closed doors, blank stares, and the unshakable weight of collective resentment. They didn't yell. They didn't argue. They simply erased him. Since then, Miles had been living in the city, writing freelance articles under a pseudonym. He rarely wrote fiction anymore. The fire that once drove him to create had dimmed under the guilt, the confusion, and the loneliness. But 2 weeks ago, everything changed. A call from a lawyer. His grandmother, Elaine Carter, had passed away, and in her will, she had left something specifically for him. Not money, not property. A key to the attic. Nothing else was explained. Miles didn't cry when he heard the news. He hadn't cried in years, but something about that key, its silence, its secrecy, pulled at him. It didn't feel like an inheritance. It felt like a whisper. Come back. There's more. So he returned to Westvale. To the house he swore he'd never step into again. To the attic filled with old furniture, forgotten photos, and dust-thick memories. To a truth still waiting to be read. The attic was colder than he remembered. It smelled of cedar, mothballs, and something older. like memory itself. Miles stood in the narrow beam of light from the single window, holding the small wooden box his grandmother had left for him. Its surface was scratched, but the latch opened with a soft click, as if it had been waiting patiently all these years. Inside were dozens of envelopes, all yellowed with age, all addressed in the same elegant, looping cursive, "To E. Carter from J. Fields." He froze. J. Fields, a name he'd never heard spoken in his family. The first letter was dated December 28, 1979. He unfolded the fragile paper, and as he read the first lines, his fingers began to tremble. "Dearest Elaine, I don't know if this letter will reach you. I don't even know if you want it to, but I have to believe that love deserves to be remembered, even if it must remain hidden." The words flowed with the kind of intimacy that couldn't be mistaken for friendship. These were not letters between siblings or colleagues or neighbors. They were love letters, poetic, deeply personal, and utterly forbidden. Miles read on, letter after letter, each one more revealing than the last. His grandmother had been in love with someone named James Fields, a man, a love kept secret for over 40 years. But it didn't stop there. In one of the later letters, dated January 1981, James wrote, "I understand your silence. I saw the photo in the paper, the engagement to Richard Carter. I hope he gives you peace. But I know what you sacrificed to be the woman they need you to be." Richard Carter, Miles's grandfather, the man everyone said Elaine loved deeply, the man who died when Miles was 10, the pillar of the family. Now that image was shattering. Miles sat on the attic floor, his hands full of pages that rewrote the family's legacy. His grandmother had chosen duty over truth, silence over self. She had buried a love to maintain an illusion, and in doing so, passed down a legacy of repression and emotional distance that infected every corner of the Carter bloodline. For the first time, it all made sense. His mother's bitterness, his uncle's rage, his father's detachment, and his own sense of not belonging, not because he was different, but because no one in the family had ever been allowed to be themselves. He looked again at the box, at the final envelope. It was addressed not to Elaine, but to Miles. It was postmarked December 14, 1998, the year James Fields had passed away, based on a brief obituary Miles later found tucked beneath it. The letter was short. "If you're reading this, Elaine must have trusted you with the truth. I hope you use it well. Tell the story, not for revenge, but so no one else has to live quietly like we did. The attic keeps secrets, but you, Miles, you turned them into light." It hit him like a punch to the chest. All this time, he had believed he was the villain in his family's story, the one who exposed their pain for personal gain. But this letter, these letters, they told a different story. He had been chosen, trusted, and now he had a choice to make. Stay silent to preserve what was left of his broken family ties, or do what he was born to do, right. But this time, not fiction. Miles stayed in West Vale longer than he had planned. At first, it was just a few days to process what he had read. But time stretched, like the shadows in that attic, growing longer and heavier with every letter he reread. Each night, he returned to the Carter house, now vacant, left to be sold, and sat cross-legged in the attic. The letters became a ritual. His hands grew more familiar with the delicate paper, his eyes less shocked by the truth, yet no less moved. He started taking notes again, not like before, not secretly or quietly, but with intent, with purpose. His grandmother's love story had reshaped his understanding of everything he thought he knew about love, family, and silence. But telling that story, that was something else entirely. Because to tell it, he would have to break the silence again. And this time, the silence wasn't just his to shatter. It was his family's entire foundation. The first step was reaching out. He started with his mother, Ruth. Their relationship had been strained even before the book. She was a rigid woman, obsessed with appearance, tradition, and loyalty to the Carter name. When Miles called, her voice was clipped. "What is it, Miles?" "I need to talk, in person. You can say whatever you need over the phone. It's about Grandma." A long pause, then, "Fine, come Sunday, but don't bring the book." He arrived with a small bag and the box of letters. She sat across from him in the formal living room, still pristine with plastic on the cushions, as if emotion might stain the furniture. He didn't speak immediately. He let her see the box, the envelopes, the handwriting. "What is this?" she asked, already defensive. "Letters, from someone Grandma loved, someone named James." His mother's face didn't change, not at first. But then her hand, the one holding her tea, trembled. "I know," she said softly. "I found them once, years ago." That answer gutted him. "And you said nothing." What was I supposed to say? That my mother lived a lie so she could keep this family together? That she was in love with a man we never met? That she suffered every Christmas under the weight of a smile she had to wear for us? There it was, the root of it. Elaine Carter had passed down more than a name. She'd passed down the art of silence and the damage it caused. "I think I need to tell her story," Miles said. "The real one. I want to write it." His mother looked at him like he had just said something sacrilegious. "Haven't you already done enough?" "No," he answered. "That book was about all of you. This is about her." "And what do you think will happen when you publish it? That the family will thank you? That we'll suddenly embrace you for exposing our pain again?" "Maybe not," he said. "But maybe someone else will read it and realize they don't have to live like she did. Maybe one person will feel less alone." That ended the conversation. She didn't throw him out, but she didn't invite him to stay either. He slept in his car that night. The days that followed were slow and agonizing. He reached out to his Uncle Daniel, a man who hadn't spoken a full sentence to Miles since the book was published. He was met with slammed doors and sarcastic remarks. "Back to destroy what's left of us, Miles." He tried calling his cousin Heather, the only family member who had once supported his writing, until the backlash had pulled her away too. She left his message on read. Even people outside the family, old friends, neighbors, seemed unsure of how to greet him now. His reputation in Westvale had become a whispered legacy, the writer who exposed his blood like a raw wound for all to see. And still, every night, he wrote. He wrote until his fingers cramped. He wrote in diners, in parking lots, in hotel lobbies, wherever he could find a quiet corner. And the more he wrote, the more he realized that this story wasn't just about a hidden love. It was about generational silence, about the cost of pretending, about what happens when a family builds its legacy on appearances instead of truth. He wrestled with it. There were nights he nearly deleted everything. One night, especially after another cold confrontation with his mother, he sat by the lake near the Carter house and seriously considered burning the letters, ending it all. "Why keep dragging them through this?" he asked aloud. But then he thought of James, of Elaine, of that final letter addressed to him, trusting him to bring light into a place that had known only shadows. That letter kept him going. Then came the invitation, not for reconciliation, not for forgiveness, but for the annual Carter Christmas Eve gathering. A formal message, signed by his mother, read simply, "This year, come if you choose. We won't pretend to agree with your choices, but we won't pretend you don't exist." It wasn't warm, but it was something. He didn't know what to expect. He didn't even know if he should go. But he packed the manuscript anyway, wrapped in ribbon, like a gift, like the box his grandmother had left for him. And on December 24th, at 6:58 p.m., Miles Carter knocked on the door of the house that once erased him. He was ready. The front door opened slowly. For a moment, No one said a word. Miles stood on the porch in his black coat, holding the manuscript like it was fragile glass. Inside, the familiar warmth of the Carter house glowed against the cold outside. Lights twinkled, Christmas music played softly, and the scent of cinnamon and roast filled the air. But it wasn't the warmth that made him hesitate. It was the eyes. All of them turned toward him at once. His mother, standing near the fireplace, wine glass in hand. Uncle Daniel, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Cousin Heather, seated stiffly at the dining table, biting her lip. The silence was suffocating. Miles stepped inside. No one moved to hug him. No one even smiled, but no one turned away. He took that as a start. He placed the wrapped manuscript gently on the table next to the tray of gingerbread cookies. It looked strange there, like it didn't belong. But then again, neither did he. Not fully. His mother's voice broke the tension. "You came. You invited me. I didn't think you would. I didn't think you meant it." The air thickened. Everyone waited. Miles took a deep breath. "I didn't come to fight or to defend the book. I came because I needed you to see something, to understand something." He held up the manuscript. "It's not about you, not this time. It's about her." He turned to his mother. "About what she couldn't say, what she gave up, what she left behind in silence so the rest of us could live without scandal." His mother's face tightened. "We respected her privacy. You buried her truth." Another silence, longer, deeper. "And what do you expect us to do with it now?" Daniel asked. "Applaud you for digging it up?" "No," Miles said. "I don't expect anything. But I think you need to know the truth before you let this house go, before you close the attic, before you keep pretending we're a family that doesn't break, or lie, or hurt." He walked toward the tree, the lights flickering against his tired face. "This isn't about shame, it's about love. And what happens when we teach people that love is something to hide, that truth is something to swallow?" He laid the manuscript on the coffee table. "I'm not publishing it, not yet, maybe never. I wrote it because she asked me to, because she trusted me, because I finally understand what she meant when she told me I see people too clearly." Miles turned toward them all. "I see all of you, still, even now, and despite everything, I came back." His voice cracked on that last word. His mother didn't cry, but she sat down. Uncle Daniel rubbed his face and muttered something under his breath. Heather stood up, walked to the table, and unwrapped the manuscript carefully. She read the title page, "The Light in the Attic" by Miles Carter. "I want to read it," she said. "So do I," someone else whispered. Miles didn't look to see who. It didn't matter. The silence that followed wasn't hostile anymore. It was open. For the first time in years, the silence made room. And for the first time in decades, the Carter family faced the truth. Not as a scandal, but as a story. A story they finally had the courage to hear. The manuscript remained in the living room for the rest of the night, untouched by judgment, passed between hands, pages carefully turned, eyes quiet with concentration. No one said much, but sometimes silence doesn't mean rejection. Sometimes it's reverence. Miles stayed longer than expected. He slept in the guest room, the same room his grandmother used to stay in when she visited after his grandfather died. That night, he dreamed not of confrontation, but of warmth. A young Elaine dancing with someone just out of frame, a man's hand reaching for hers in the dark, finding it, holding on. In the morning, Ruth made coffee. No words, just 2 cups, one placed in front of Miles without ceremony. "You look tired," she said. "Didn't sleep much." "Neither did I." They didn't say much more, but when she picked up the manuscript again after breakfast, Miles noticed her fingertips lingered on the pages, like they were touching something sacred. Later that week, Heather called. "I finished it." Miles braced himself. "It broke me," she said, "but in a good way." A pause. "I didn't know Grandma like that. I wish I had. I wish we all had." They talked for an hour. About Elaine, about writing, about the weight of silence and the courage it takes to break it. Slowly, others followed. Daniel didn't apologize, but he called. Said he'd been thinking. Said maybe it wasn't too late to fix some things with his own daughter. Things he'd never talked about because he thought it was better that way. Even Ruth began sharing small memories. The way Elaine hummed when she cooked. The way she used to pause mid-sentence, as if weighing whether a truth was worth speaking aloud. Little by little, the transformation took root. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just honest. Miles returned to the city a month later. He left a copy of the manuscript in West Vale, on the same shelf that once held old family photo albums and boxes of Christmas ornaments. This time, no one asked him to take it with him. Back in his apartment, Miles sat by the window and looked out over the winter skyline. He didn't feel like an outsider anymore, not because he'd been embraced completely, but because he had embraced himself. He opened a new document, title Letters in the Attic. But he didn't rush. This time, the words could wait. He took long walks, reread his grandmother's letters, revisited memories not with bitterness, but with curiosity. And as the days passed, the story evolved, no longer a weapon, but a bridge. He wrote not for revenge, not even for truth, but for love. The next Christmas, the invitation came early. Handwritten, simple. "Come home, we're saving you a seat." And when he arrived, the same house, once cold with silence, greeted him with warmth, laughter, light. There were still tensions, of course. Healing takes time, but there was also space for conversation, for vulnerability, for truth. Heather gave him a gift, a framed photograph of Elaine Carter as a young woman. In her hand, a letter, half folded, half hidden. Her smile was soft, private, as if she knew her story would finally be told. "She would have been proud of you," Heather said. Miles looked at the photo and felt something he hadn't in years. Peace. And not just peace in being heard, but peace in having listened. He had come full circle, not to expose, not to confront, but to carry forward the legacy of a woman who had loved quietly and who had waited for someone to turn that silence into something lasting. Have you ever discovered something about your family that changed the way you saw everything? Have you ever carried a truth that felt too heavy to speak out loud? Miles's story isn't just about secrets or silence. It's about courage. The courage to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The courage to love honestly, even when it's hidden in an attic for decades. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own journey, your own silence, your own attic of memories, I invite you to share. Have you ever been the one to speak up in your family? What happened? Let us know in the comments. Your words could help someone who's still afraid to speak theirs. And if you believe that stories like this deserve to be told, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that were almost never told.